1961, the world was divided by an iron curtain. Above the surface, the space race was screaming toward the moon. But beneath the waves, a much darker, much faster race was beginning. In the secret city of Severodvinsk, Soviet scientists were tasked with a mission that sounded like madness. They weren't building a boat. They were building a weapon that shouldn't exist. Welcome to our most in-depth exploration yet of Project 705 Lyra. The West called it the Alpha. The East called it the Golden Fish. History calls it a mechanical miracle and a terrifying nightmare. Chapter 1: The Impossible Order. Why 1961? The U.S. Navy was rapidly expanding its nuclear fleet. The Soviets realized they couldn't outbuild the West in numbers. They had to outbuild them in technology. They needed a silver bullet. An interceptor submarine. Think about an interceptor jet like the MiG-25. It sits on the runway, waits for a target, flies at Mach 3, kills, and returns. The Soviet Navy wanted that, but under 400 meters of water. They wanted a sub that could hide in a fjord, wait for a NATO carrier group, sprint at impossible speeds, fire its torpedoes, and disappear before the enemy's sonar could even process what happened. Curiosity question number 1. How do you move thousands of tons of metal through water faster than the weapons designed to destroy it? To answer that, they had to break every rule of traditional shipbuilding. Chapter 2: The Titanium Fortress. Let's talk about the hull. Steel has limits. If you make a steel sub thick enough to go deep, it becomes too heavy to go fast. The Soviets made a choice that shocked the world: pure titanium. Titanium is the king of metals. It's light. It's incredibly strong. And crucially, it is non-magnetic. Most mines and detection systems in 1961 relied on magnetic signatures. An Alfa-Class submarine was effectively a ghost to these systems. But there was a catch. Titanium is picky. If a single molecule of oxygen touches a titanium weld, the whole structure becomes as brittle as glass. The Soviets had to invent the argon method. They built gigantic sheds, sucked out all the air, and filled them with argon gas. The workers had to wear pressurized suits with external oxygen supplies. One tear in a suit meant instant death for the worker. One mistake in a weld meant the submarine would implode under pressure. The cost of this process was so high that it was rumored the Alfa-Class cost more than the Soviet Union's entire space program for that year. Chapter 3: The Liquid Metal Heartbeat. Now, let's go into the engine room. This is where the Alpha moves from engineering to science fiction. A normal nuclear reactor uses water to cool the core. But water needs space. The Alpha didn't have space. The solution? A Lead-Bismuth eutectic liquid metal reactor. Imagine a reactor where the coolant isn't water, but molten metal flowing through the pipes. This allowed the reactor to be incredibly dense and powerful. It provided a power-to-weight ratio that remains unmatched even today. Curiosity question number 2. What happens if the engine stops? In a normal sub, you just restart it. In an Alpha, if the temperature dropped below 125 degrees Celsius, the Lead-Bismuth would freeze. It would turn into solid metal inside the pipes. The reactor would be brickhead. A multi-billion-dollar machine turned into a useless block of radioactive ice. This meant the Alpha's heart had to beat forever. Even at the pier, it had to be fed constant heat. It was a machine that could never truly sleep. Chapter 4: The 41-knot shockwave. Let's talk about the performance. When the Alpha finally underwent sea trials, it did the unthinkable. It hit 41 knots. To put that in perspective, that's 76 kilometers per hour through the resistance of deep water. When an Alpha went to full power, the vibration was so intense that it would rattle the teeth of the crew. The noise was deafening, not a hum, but a roar. NATO sonar operators thousands of miles away would hear a sound like a freight train underwater. The U.S. Navy was terrified. Their primary torpedo, the Mark 46, had a top speed of about 40 knots. The Alpha could literally look at an incoming torpedo and drive away from it. It was the first time in history a ship was faster than the bullet fired at it. This forced the Americans to go back to the drawing board, spending billions to create the Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo. Chapter 5: The Cybernetic Crew. Inside the Alpha, it didn't look like a submarine. It looked like a spaceship. Because the sub was so small, there was no room for 100 men. So, they automated everything. They created a centralized control system called Sargon. For the first time, a nuclear submarine was operated by only 30 to 32 people. And here is a fascinating detail: every single person on board was a commissioned officer. There were no enlisted swabbers. Every man was a high-level engineer or pilot. But this automation came with a psychological price. The isolation was intense. The machines were doing the thinking. The crew was just there to monitor the liquid metal dragon in the basement. Chapter 6: The Failure of Perfection. If the Alpha was so perfect, why don't we see them today? The answer is maintenance. The Alpha was too advanced for its own good. The shore infrastructure required to keep the liquid metal molten was a logistical nightmare. Out of the 7 hulls built, several suffered catastrophic reactor freezes. In one famous incident, a reactor began to leak. The liquid metal hit the floor and solidified, trapping the submarine in its own blood. It was impossible to repair. The very thing that gave the Alpha its godlike speed was the thing that eventually killed the class. By the time the Soviet Union collapsed, the golden fish were too expensive to keep on life support. Conclusion: the ghost in the deep. The Alfa-Class was a 1961 vision of the year 2000. It was a ship built by a country that pushed the limits of physics and human endurance. It remains a symbol of the Cold War, a time when cost was no object, and the impossible was just a starting point. Curiosity question number 3: if we built an Alpha today with modern AI and materials, could anything in the ocean stop it? Or is some technology simply too dangerous to exist? Thank you for joining us on this massive journey into the depths. Like this video if you learned something new. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more fascinating stories.